I can hear you, Matt.
Oh, are we live?
Not yet.
Natasha, can you hear me at all?
Yes, I can hear you. Hello, this is Natasha Pernica. I'm Executive Director at the Food Pantries for the Capital District. Welcome to the session, New York State Food Access Initiatives, where we're learning about new New York State government initiatives that are helping expand food access, including Nourish New York, food waste, and veterans programs. So we're going to start today talking about Nourish New York. So if we can put up the Nourish New York slideshow, we will start with that. So we'll give our tech team a minute to get the Nourish New York slideshow up. Our first speaker today will be Susan Zimmett. Susan Zimmett is the New York State Food and Anti-Hunger Policy Coordinator of the New York State government. And so I am going to kick it over. And this one looks like Lindsay's presentation. So we're going to wait just a second to get up the other Nourish New York presentation up. Give us just one moment. And we'll bring Susan Zimmett up once we've got her presentation up and she can get started. So Susan, I'll kick it over to you and we'll wait as we get your slideshow up. Please give us just one moment while we get the slideshow up. Thank you so much. I don't know how many of you are partnering with New York State in a lot of different ways to help with your own hunger programming. I know here at the Food Pantries for the Capital District, we've been having a great working relationship with the state, and especially through COVID, we've been very appreciative of all the crisis response and programs that have come out of crisis and the new relationships that that have formed and become even stronger through this. So we're just working on getting the anti-hunger presentation up so that Susan can share the great work that they're doing.
Am I on?
I'm ready to go, Susan.
Natasha,
we've got your slides and you are on. So everybody, please welcome Susan Zimmett.
And you can hear me?
Oh, Susan went away. Susan's back.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay.
All right, we're good to go.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this session. We have a lot to talk about. If I wasn't nervous enough about the time and the technology, I'm now over the top, but thank you, Natasha, for having us. We have a great panel, and I'd like to introduce my panel members. Next slide. Do we have the next slide? Okay, here with me is Lindsay McMahon from Ag and Marks, Benjamin Pomerantz from the New York State Division of Veteran Services, and Rihanna Gonzalez from the Department of Homeland Security. I'm thrilled to have them, and I can't wait to hear them present. Okay, next slide. Okay, we're going to look at hunger through various lenses. There's a lot to talk about. You can find this presentation on the resource page with some typos or whatever, but it's there for you because I'm going to go through this pretty quickly because there's so much to talk about. And, you know, we want to be able to have everybody have some time to talk about it. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so let's first look at children. I think we all agree with Governor Cuomo that no child should ever go hungry. And I think that's been a theme throughout this conference. There's a lot of things the governor has done in response to children and hunger. But the most important thing right now during COVID has been the PEBT card, which was the ability to make sure that children who weren't in school that are on free and reduced meals were still getting fed. Very, very big program to stand up. Thank you to OTDA, to Tom Hederman, Barbara Gwynn, and the whole team there in SED for the work that they've done on this program. Next slide. Okay, college students, we heard at the very beginning from Dr. Graham about the SUNY Anti-Hunger Task Force and about establishing food pantries or stigma-free access on all the campuses. Dr. Graham and I did do a trip and went to a number of the food pantries, and it's very impressive what the college students have done. Very exciting. This was the first thing I was asked to work on when I got appointed to this position, was to work on expanding supplemental nutrition to college students. So we've been able to help 75,000 low-income college students enrolled in a Carl Perkins eligible career or technical program. If they have, they meet the income guideline, they don't have to do the work study program in order to get SNAP. So 75,000 students will now be able to get SNAP and continue to go to school, which is very, very exciting. Next slide. Okay, seniors. One of the key things for seniors we wanted to do was make it easy for them to enroll in SNAP. And so a simplified application was done by OTDA, and it's now available to get seniors to apply for SNAP in a much more user-friendly way. Another very exciting project that we've been doing with the pantries of the Capital District is the New York Connects website added an emergency feeding program so seniors can access free food. One of the number one questions during COVID that was being called to Office for the Aging was, where do we find food? So Capital Pantries had a website. They've expanded it to the statewide. We now have a working relationship with the Department of Health and NYSOFR, where basically every week when we get the updated information on what pantries are open and closed, we get that to Capital District Pantries. They put it into the website and it goes live, and anybody can actually access this. We'd love to talk to you more about it. Very exciting. We also have a pilot in the Hudson Valley that's in development that we're very excited about. It was in the Governor's State of the State, and it's going to be utilizing commercial kitchens through the NYSOFR program, where we're going to be diverting ugly, nutritious food waste to these kitchens and turning them into meal components that will be flash frozen and delivered to seniors. We're going to start in the Hudson Valley, and then we're going to expand it hopefully statewide. So we're very excited about that. Next slide. Veterans, I'm not going to even talk about this because I don't want to step on Benjamin's toes. Very exciting work that we're doing with veterans. Very excited for Benjamin's presentation. Next slide. Okay, economic focus on hunger. We all know that basically people pay for their rent first, they pay for heat second. If they're fortunate enough to have health care, they pay for health care third. And more often than not, that forces them to go to a food pantry because they don't have money for food. So the issues that lift people out of poverty are critical, like increasing the minimum wage, which our governor did in 2016, and we're really happy about that. We're also the first state to work with the USDA to create a pilot for online SNAP shopping. We need to expand that to more retailers, farmers, and farmers markets. We're working with a technology company to make it easier for people to be able to access this, and we're working with the USDA to try to speed this up because it's of critical importance. Next slide. Food as medicine. This is something that Natasha and Pantries of the Capital District is totally on top of. And in November of 2018, the governor did Executive Order 190, the prevention agenda. And the whole purpose is to basically look at healthy eating and food security through all the programs the state has. So we're looking to increase food security through the prevention agenda. Again, another very exciting program introduced in 2018. Next slide. Hunger and climate change. This was up a lot, so everybody probably had a chance to read it. But again, the governor, very forward-thinking, 2015, he introduced the Climate Resilient Farming Program. This is being talked about now on a national and an international level about the impact of climate change on our farms and our farmers. A critically important program to reduce the impact of agriculture on climate change. Very exciting. Next slide. Okay, this is about Nourish New York, an amazing program, but Lindsay's going to actually do a presentation on that. So I'll leave this for Lindsay. So next slide. State innovations. In addition to Nourish New York, when the governor was doing his daily briefings at the beginning of COVID, after he introduced Nourish New York, the next thing he did was a COVID fund where he asked for people to donate money, services, and food to help the long lines at the food pantries that we're seeing every night on TV. We got generous contributions from New Yorkers and beyond. A special thanks to HelloFresh and Patel Brothers for the amazing donation they gave that made a very big difference for COVID and the long lines at the food banks in the city. And with the dollars that we raised, we're going to be basically helping the food banks and emergency feeding programs to do more transportation of food donations and home deliveries. So starting next week, we're going to hopefully be getting money out to the food banks to help them with their food delivery. There's also a tax checkoff box that got implemented 2 years ago, where if you're doing your New York taxes, you check off a box and give money to go into a fund that will help with food banks' needs. And we just bought, we're in the midst right now of buying 85 refrigerators and freezers for the emergency feeding programs through this monetary donation. So if you haven't done your taxes yet, please check it off and know we're using that money very wisely. We do a lot of volunteer work in the hunger field, and we're waiting for the federal money allocation this year to build out. Very, very exciting program we introduced this year in the governor's state of the state is the New York Cares and Baby to Baby Diaper Bank, where we all know that diapers are very, very hard to come by and very expensive. We were able to create a program where we get 20 million diapers that will be donated over the next 2 years to the 10 New York State food banks. It's already in place. The first quarter has already been done. We're already delivering for the second quarter, and we're only going to be growing this program bigger and bigger and bigger. Really exciting. And I'm going to let the FEMA diaper wipe donation be talked about by Rihanna when she does her presentation. Next slide. Okay, where do we go from here? Next slide. Okay, so the three buckets that we're looking at is maximizing enrollment in federal programs, maximizing food access, and connecting the dots. Next slide. Okay, so when we talk about maximizing enrollment in federal programs, we're talking about leaving no money on the table. So in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, based on the great work of Hunger Solutions, Hunger Free America, and our other partners, we have close to 92% to 96% of all eligible families enrolled in SNAP. So that's pretty amazing. WIC, we need to do a lot more work. DOH is working really hard on this. The federal government's doing some programs to help. And then there are other programs that we have to also just make sure we're maximizing. Leave no money on the table. Next slide. Food access. That became a critical issue that we learned during COVID, how fragile the food system is. We need to build on the success of Nourish New York. We need to revise state procurement policy to reflect changes in cold storage so we can buy more New York fruits and vegetables year round. We have to build out low-cost grocery stores in all the food deserts in New York State. We're doing a lot of work in this area. We hope to have some great news in Troy coming soon, followed by some good news in Albany, and then go from there. We're looking to expand community gardens. We've gotten over $1 million SNAP Ed grant to work on this. Very excited. Also, there's a creation that's in the works of the biggest tech project the state's ever taken on, which is the Integrated Eligibility System, which will be a client-centric integrated approach website to provide benefits in one easy shopping way. We finally got permission from the federal government to move forward. It's going to take a lot of time. I'm loading all the files up, but it's going to be a very exciting addition to making it easier for people to be able to get the services they need. Next slide. Okay, connecting the dots. We have a number of agencies that work within the hunger field that do policy and also purchase food. This doesn't even include things like corrections office and stuff. We buy a lot of food. We spend $1 billion spending $1 billion of state money buying food, and we need to align some of our work, which is in the next slide. Connecting the dots, ending silos. So what we have to do is we have to begin a comprehensive analysis of all the state agency programs that have new food and nutrition in their portfolio. So we've got to get things out of silos, understand access duplication, coordinate programs, and streamline to the best of our ability. We also have to look at all of the state studies that have been done on hunger and look at the recommendations and work to implement. There's a number of regional food systems that are going underway around the state. We need to work with all of these areas on their food system plan and use this as a foundation for building a statewide food system plan, which we're in the middle of doing. Next slide. Okay, COVID and food insecurity. What did COVID expose? It exposed that government safety net programs are more important than ever, and charity can't do it alone. Many families are one paycheck away. The food system is very fragile. We need new delivery models. Emergency feeding programs need a more dependent model of funding and staffing. And there are two types of customers now, the newly hungry, who aren't even aware of where to go and what to do, and those that are food insecure on a continuous basis. Next slide. So quickly, lessons learned. The pandemic upended the entire food system. We need to learn from the crisis, and food touches everyone. We have to invest in the food economy, which creates jobs, improves health and education outcomes, which will save taxpayers dollars on the back end. Next slide. Okay, so what we need to do and what we are doing is we at the state are starting to shift from a business perspective versus a charity lens. We don't want to look at hunger and the hunger work all through charity and having the state just come up with more and more money. We've got to fix the problem. We've got to address the issues that put people, going to a food pantry in the first place. Let's look at the business of the food system and build out a robust food system, because again, food touches everyone. So let's, from the Nourish New York lens, look at the farmer, look at the food hubs, look at the transportation, look at the processing, look at everything that touches food, the business of food down to the consumer, and how do we create a robust food system. Next slide. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay. I want to thank you for joining us. I want to thank my panel for taking the time to be on this. Thanks, Capital Pantries, for allowing us to present. And I look forward to the questions and working with all of you as we go forward. Lindsay, the show's yours.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I'm just looking. Oh, there are my slides. Perfect. Okay. So thank you very much, Susan and Natasha and everybody else who's been a part of putting on this fabulous summit today. Like Susan said, my name is Lindsay McMahon, and I'm a policy coordinator with the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets. In addition to my large role in the Nourish New York initiative, which has been a very popular topic today, I also facilitate the state's Council on Hunger and Food Policy, which is also very relevant to the conversation happening here today. But for this presentation, I'm going to strictly be talking about the Nourish New York initiative. So with the pandemic, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, we saw a lot of different relief packages, food aid packages, being developed. And when I say beginning, I mean, March, April of 2020. But they hadn't quite gotten to the point yet where they were connecting the dots with local production and really looking at the whole system and where the impacts were. At the same time, we saw a huge demand, an increase in demand within the emergency food system. Like Susan said, there was a large influx of people that were now hungry, in addition to the people that were already hungry in the state. And at the same time, we also had farmers who were facing supply chain disruptions that was resulting in a lot of different types of food waste, from milk dumping to crops being left unharvested in fields, crops in cold storage like apples and potatoes that had lost their end market. Schools were a really large part of that. And even fishing fleets that were on Long Island that really relied on the restaurant industry that were idled. And so all of these impacts resulted in some very strategic thinking. And I by no means want to make it seem that Nourish New York is the only strategic thinking that happened. You know, Susan just touched on a bunch of wonderful initiatives, and that's just really at the state level. Of course, we had all kinds of grassroots organizations that pivoted in an absolutely inspirational way, in addition to Nourish New York. But really, these factors here on the screen are what resulted in Nourish New York being created. And so on April 27th of 2020, Governor Cuomo announced $25 million in funding to purchase surplus agricultural products from New York State farms. And that funding was put through the 10 regional food banks and select other emergency food providers in the state. And so I've just listed out the 10 food banks here and provided a map on the right here. And what's important to highlight is that the food bank network in the state, which you all know is robust and covers every county in the state. And so by taking this initiative, this idea, and funneling it through this existing network, we were able to launch this work extremely quickly and very effectively. And so I think that that's something about Nourish New York that could really be replicated on other levels, whether we're talking about federal programs or even other state programs. Really not reinventing the wheel there. Using the existing network was really important and key in being able to do this work quickly. So how the initiative has worked, it really focuses on supplying nutritious, locally produced food at competitive pricing to these food banks. So that has allowed for a range of items to be purchased. Dairy is obviously very significant. It is the largest agricultural crop in terms of economic output for the state. So dairy products are very important and prolific in the state, but it's also allowed for the purchase of produce, meat, eggs, and even some processed goods like grain-based products, of course, that were grown or produced in the state. And we allowed for numerous mechanisms to be utilized to use these dollars. So dairy vouchers were one method that are still being used. That essentially is a coupon system where people are given a coupon. They can go to their supermarket and get milk or whatever the coupon is for. Food boxes have become a really important model for several reasons. Just minimizes contact with food, helps things move very quickly, minimizes the personnel that the food banking network needs in order to get food into the hands of people. Large drive-through events were another very important method, where we had these really large events that would take place with just tractor trailers of New York product, and cars would drive through, sign up in advance, and have packages of food put in their trunk. And that's what these photos here on the right are depicting, with our Commissioner Richard Ball in the bottom right there. And our department as well, in addition to the Department of Health as well. This is not an initiative that has been solely conducted just by Ag and Markets. We've worked very closely with the organizations that have received funding. We've worked very closely with producers and processors to really play this facilitation role, where we're helping to identify purchasing opportunities, where we're helping the food banks and the pantries navigate this new system of procurement. But also still encouraging them to utilize local supply chains if they had them. You know, many of these entities were already working with local businesses, and we wanted to, not obviously end that, but bolster it with additional dollars, and help those that weren't yet forming new connections and accessing products that they may not have been able to before. And so the really important thing to highlight on this slide is that there's been such flexibility with how the people receiving these dollars have been able to execute this program. They've been able to use methods and buy products that work for them. It's not prescriptive. And that's been so important in helping them meet the needs within the local context in which they work, including buying culturally appropriate food, for example. Okay, and so the impact of Nourish New York, which is the part that I think a lot of people want to hear about. There's been a total of $85 million invested in this program thus far. The first round was $25 million, took us May to October of 2020. Additional funding of $10 million was then immediately awarded for November to December. And then in the most recent state budget, there was $50 million, and that took us through January of July of this year. So that's currently what we're working through. And then an additional $25 million's already been allocated for August to December of this year. And what this really reflects is an understanding at the state level that this need is not going to go away. There has been a severe impact on people's food security due to this health crisis, and that's being recognized. And so these dollars and making sure that there's additional support in place have just been really important and key to a lot of these organizations in being able to plan what their year is going to look like. And to date, as of last week, this program has spent approximately $46 million on New York State products. That is money that is going directly to farms. That is money that has helped a lot of businesses actually stay afloat. A lot of farms prevented from going out of business due to those dollars. And that has equated to roughly 30 million pounds of food, which is equal to 24 million meals. So this is getting, money into the hands of farmers. It's getting food into people's stomachs, and it's really just been a super impactful program and a wonderful one to be a part of. And it's impacted nearly 4,200 farms across the state. So that is the quick summary of Nourish New York. Again, I want to reiterate that this program is by no means the only solution to this issue. There's so many other fantastic initiatives that have also been launched or have been maximized during this time. And I really think that we need all the tools in the toolbox to really solve the hunger issue in the future. So I have my contact information up on the screen, and you're more than welcome to contact me with any additional questions in the future. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lindsay. And now I believe Benjamin Pomerantz, the Deputy Director for Program Development, New York State Division of Veterans Services, will talk about the VETS program. Thanks.
Thank you, Natasha. Thank you very much. A real pleasure and a privilege to be with you all today. A lot of you may be wondering why I'm here. Why exactly is this lawyer from the State Division of Veterans Services showing up at this program? Isn't it the case that when somebody serves in the military and when somebody returns home from military service, aren't they taken care of by the country that they served for the rest of their lifetime? That's commonly the assumption. However, the reality of what that looks like in this country is a bit different. And it came as a surprise to me when in 2018, I was on the telephone with the director of the Military Family Advisory Network, nationwide group. And I said, what, in your opinion, are the three most pressing issues that are confronting military families today? And the first one, the very first one that she mentioned, was food insecurity. And I said, really? Even for those who are currently serving? Yes, even for those who are currently serving in our nation's military, food insecurity can be, and too often is, a significant issue that they are facing. I don't want to laden you too much with statistics, but here's a few that might seem kind of surprising to you. As of 2020, there were nearly 1.5 million veterans in the USA living below the federal poverty level. Post 9/11 veterans, right? Those who served 9/11, 2001 or later, they face food insecurity at twice the level of their general population counterparts, twice as likely to struggle to put meals on the table than those who did not serve from 9/11, 2001 through the present day. Of the households that are served by Feeding America food pantries and meal programs, 20% have a member who served or is presently serving in the United States military. More than 20,000 people, and I think it's a low estimate, but 20,000 people reported on active duty rely completely on SNAP benefits to keep themselves and their families well fed. I could go on, but I think you get the point. This is an issue that flies below the radar, and it affects the individuals who have put their lives on the line to serve this country and the values for which it stands. We have just completed Memorial Day. All day long, what's the refrain? Thank you for your service, right? Veterans Day, thank you for your service. July 4th, thank you for your service, etc. And that's great. Okay, the thanks is important. It is vital. But as we always say at the State Division of Veteran Services, it can't end with just the thanks. The thanks also has to translate into concrete action. And certainly when we're talking about our nation's veterans and our state's veterans who are going to bed hungry and their families going to bed hungry at night, there is action that needs to be taken. They say that crises can be crucibles for action. And that's the case in a significant sense with COVID-19 in New York State for veterans surrounding the issue of food insecurity. And it starts back with Susan Zimmett, from whom you heard earlier. Got a telephone call from Susan out of the blue one day. Susan mentioned the governor's COVID-19 philanthropic fund and the great partnership that the state has established with the HelloFresh Meal Kit Corporation. Well, the call from Susan out of the blue was around the establishment of this partnership with HelloFresh and this idea that HelloFresh was talking about the contribution of 50,000 meals, nutritious, sustainable meals in a 3-month period. And we were talking about what can be done to utilize that contribution in the best possible way. And of course, very quickly, the talk turned to veterans, given the food insecurity challenges that I've already told you about that veterans and military families too often face. And that's where it began, with that contribution, that willingness to be part of this mission from HelloFresh. They loved the idea of working with veterans and military families, and we were off to the races. But the next hurdle to overcome was to find people in communities, to find people in New York State's regional, localized levels who would be engaged with this as well, because it's only the first step of the process to get the food from HelloFresh to a particular site. From that point, it has to be sorted, packed, and brought to the hands of the people who need to receive it and to utilize it to keep themselves and their families fed. Thankfully, there is a robust network in New York State of veterans who are willing, ready, and able to engage in volunteerism. And COVID-19 had brought a lot of this to a standstill at this point, almost 1 year ago to the date, when we began making these phone calls, sending these emails saying, hey, we have this opportunity. Do you and your fellow veterans want to engage in this effort to bring food, nourishing food, to your fellow veterans and their families? The response was incredible. The response was as great as any of us possibly could have hoped, with these veteran leaders stepping forward to say, yep, I'm here. Send my marching orders my way, and I'm ready to go out and do what needs to be done. Our first step of the process began in Western New York with Western New York Heroes. June 23rd, 2020 was the opening day of this initiative, where the refrigerated truck went from the HelloFresh warehouse all the way out to Buffalo, got to the Buffalo site. Western New York Heroes volunteers were on site, ready to go, unloaded the truck, packed the meal kits, got the meals delivered. A local restaurant even donated the use of their refrigerator and their freezer, because they were closed during the pandemic, to store the food to make certain that it remained in top shape and top quality for those veterans who couldn't arrive on site that day. And that began the work in Western New York. July 1st kicked off our work in New York City in a collaboration between the New York City Department of Veteran Services and the wonderful not-for-profit organization Black Veterans for Social Justice, saying, yeah, we'll have people on site week after week after week working with a group called the Campaign Against Hunger, where the food was delivered from HelloFresh into their warehouse. They donated the use of that space. They also provided some volunteers to assist with the sorting and packing efforts. Black Veterans for Social Justice volunteers joined in that assembly line style effort. And the New York City Department of Veteran Services also engaged with veterans groups and organizations throughout the 5 boroughs to make certain that the food was going to get successfully from the Campaign Against Hunger warehouse into the hands of other veterans groups whose members, whose partners, whose colleagues, who they knew were facing challenges during COVID-19, right? Because all those stats I mentioned to you before about food insecurity only got worse. The challenge only became enhanced, like so many other challenges during COVID-19. They did that on the ground work to get the food into the hands of the people in New York City who needed it. Along the way, that effort brought a new realization that there was a particularly large concentration of veterans who were confronting food insecurity in the Bronx. And that led to the establishment of a third arm of this initiative, specifically focused on veterans in the Bronx, with a Bronx site, a Bronx distribution point, Bronx volunteers, focusing on getting food, particularly to those veterans in that borough where food insecurity was seen and reported as being extraordinarily high. And then the fourth arm of this, the most recent arm, which has been flourishing since it began, is way up here in my home region of the North Country, where the Joint Council of Economic Opportunity of Clinton and Franklin counties, in collaboration with the Clinton County Veteran Service Agency, put together an initiative based on what we had done, based on that proof of concept in New York City and Western New York, to achieve the ability to get money into their hands that they then use to purchase food from the Food Bank of Northeastern New York. Now, the ultimate end of the story of this is the North Country Project and the Bronx Project were able to get a wonderful grant from our partners at the New York State Health Foundation. Fantastic philanthropic organization that provided money to keep these programs sustained throughout this calendar year. But in the North Country, at the very beginning, before that grant was signed, sealed, and delivered, the project began up in this region in northern New York because of the individual contributions of veterans and their families and supporters of veterans, up to and including one gentleman who put out a pretty impressive Christmas light display at his house during the month of December and into January. And he put a box out front. And he said, anybody who wants to provide non-perishable food items, or in the little lockbox there, a monetary contribution, is able to do so. And all of that money and all of that food will go toward this effort in the North Country. And it was incredible how much money and how much food that one U.S. Air Force veteran was able to raise over the course of doing this work. So here we are today, 1 year almost to the day into this work, June of 2021. We are approaching the level of 500,000 nourishing meals being distributed to veterans and to their families in these 4 areas. We have partnerships. Susan talked about breaking down silos. This is the emblematic project for breaking down silos, because we have government, we have private sector, we have not-for-profit, we have city and state working together. We have so many different collaborations and inroads taking place, all in this same essential mission of making certain that those who served our country are able to put nourishing food on their tables for themselves and for their families. It's truly an honor to be here today and talk about this, to raise this issue to the forefront for people who are drivers of change and drivers of strong policy and strong programs in this area. Because as I said at the outset, the obvious question is, why am I here? Why is the veterans guy here talking at a food summit? Because this issue not only impacts those who have served this country, but impacts them in disproportionately high levels. And it is through the grace and the goodness of the people of New York State that these programs have evolved out of COVID-19 with the leadership of so many individuals in these regions I've mentioned to get food to these individuals and their families. So I'll turn the microphone over now to Rayana for her presentation. Looking forward to your questions. Thank you all so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let's see. Doesn't look like my slideshow is working. Good afternoon. Like you said, my name is Rayana Gonzalez, and I am with the New York State Division of Homeland Security. I'm here to talk about the feeding work group and feeding capacity survey that were both created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In March of 2020, DISHES, in partnership with other state agencies and partners who were concerned regarding the feeding needs across New York State, created the feeding work group and survey in response to known food insecurities in various communities. These food insecurities were due to individuals not being able to find and or purchase food for various reasons, including disruptions in supply chains. The work group met regularly to discuss feeding innovations and to promote feeding partners such as Nourish New York in order to get food to the most in need while helping family farmers. This partnership not only helped support the New York farmers, but provided aid to food banks and communities in need. This program continues to help those who have insecure food needs and provide nourishment across the state. Approximately $25 million in funding provided to the food banks for the purchase of agricultural food products such as produce, meat, eggs, seafood, and dairy products from the New York State farms and processors. Again, in partnership with the Food and Anti-Hunger Policy Coordinator, Susan, and New York State DISHES IA, Department of Agriculture and Markets, Department of Health, American Red Cross, the Office of Children and Family Services, and the Office of General Services. In order to quickly identify needs, the feeding work group developed a survey that was then distributed biweekly via email to about 2,300 feeding partners across the state. This included food pantries, local offices for the aging sites, and the Salvation Army feeding program. The questions in the survey were regarding the entity's ability to sustain their feeding program for a set period of time and to identify specific food needs. In addition to the food-related questions, questions regarding PPE and hand sanitizer needs were also added due to the nature of COVID. Over time, it was noted there were also a need for volunteers in order to continue operations. These responses were then used to connect partners with available resources. Some of the most common requests included shelf-stable items like peanut butter, rice, and tuna, fresh items such as was said earlier through Nourish New York, dairy products, PPE, hand sanitizer, as well as plastic bags for packaging the orders, in addition to financial assistance that was mentioned earlier. Now, as far as the response, we were able to secure shopping bags for the patrons. As you all are aware, as of March 1st in New York State, plastic carry-out bags were banned from distribution. So these bags, as well as reusable bags, have been consistently being monitored for need in the feeding survey. You will see that in the April 27th through May 4th survey, we had about 419 responses, and almost half responded to need for bags. We're currently working with other partners to identify a solution for a sponsor for the purchase of reusable bags, and recognition that the reusable bags can be used in the community as people also continue to secure food through traditional measures. This is just a quick snapshot regarding the needs that was identified early on in the pandemic. So you can see that we had situations where food pantries were at risk or other providers at risk of failure within 2 weeks, as well as many who were not at risk at all. So what we were able to do with that information is make sure that we really targeted those areas that had such a severe need, so that way we would continue to support those communities of need. Once we received the results of the food survey, we were then able to put them in buckets of need, so that way we can match them up with donors. You'll see we had essentially 3 categories: food items, packaging and boxing, as well as volunteers. This is just a snapshot of the results. You will see in the food items that there was quite a need for self-sustained shelf food. This includes the rice, the tuna that was mentioned earlier. Also, we had a huge need for t-shirt or plastic bags. And of course, volunteers. Given the nature of the pandemic, it put a challenge for some of the providers to have volunteers to move the needed food to the communities in which they were serving. We luckily, through the partnership and collaboration with others, had several success stories. one being around hand sanitizer. We were able to connect hand sanitizer task force with the New York State production of hand sanitizer during the national shortage to make sure individuals had what they need. In addition to that, we had success stories around PPE where we coordinated with county emergency management. Various donations, there was a team of Red Cross volunteers that sorted through over 3,000 offers and pushed donations to local areas. This connected available donations with needs identified in this survey. Overall, we also had many successes with our connections. Through this work group, we established ongoing partnerships and regular information sharing with New York Food and Anti-Hunger Policy Coordinator, the food banks, food pantries, and other important partners to best serve the residents of New York State. Another success story that we want to highlight is a company called Well Before. This was previously referred to as Honest PPE. This is a Texas-based company. They donated over 97,000 masks to almost 200 organizations in New York State. The request for much needed PPE was made through the feeding capacity survey and then shared with Well Before. In turn, Well Before then shipped the donations directly to the organizations in need, helping those communities as well as the volunteer members. Another success story that was alluded to earlier is through FEMA. They had a New York State-based company that donated various truckloads of baby wipes throughout the nation. We were able to secure 10 truckloads of baby wipes for our various food pantries within New York State. So again, through the partnership with Susan Zamet and others, we were able to make sure that the wipes went where the diapers were, so that way our families in need had what they had identified as a need. And that's all for our presentation. I hand it back over to Natasha.
Thank you so much. It has been incredible to hear all of the different things that New York State is doing to increase food access and get healthy food out to New Yorkers. We just have 1 minute. Wanted to see if there were any questions in the comment section. It looks like overseeing step work, connect the dots. So we do have one question from Matt Griffin. Thank you for the presentation showing effective collaboration. What groups will be overseeing the statewide efforts to connect the dots described by Susan? Susan, do you want to give a response to Matt's question?
Sure. Basically, in essence, pretty much I'll be overseeing it with a whole bunch of partners, working with Fran Barrett, who's the governor's non-for-profit person. Fran and I work very, very closely together, and we'll start working on this. Basically, one of my job descriptions, actually the first job description in my job, is actually to get things out of silo and to coordinate the work amongst the different agencies. And so we're about to start to undertake trying to assess what each agency does, how they touch food, what kind of policy, how much money they spend, and then we'll start working from there and going from there. But we'll be working with all of the agencies, and it's just that Fran and I will take the lead.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan.
Welcome.
And that wraps up our session today. It's 1:50. I want to thank all of our panelists. Very, very excited to have you here. And for everyone who participated, I hope you learned a lot, and we'll move forward towards this. So you've got about 10 minutes until our next session starts at 2 o'clock. Feel free to go to the pulse check. We've got a poll there to find out what you think about hunger and how to end hunger. We'd love to get your feedback in the pulse check section. And you can go back to the next session starting at 2. Thank you so much.